Welcome to Australian basketball history. Why don't we kick off with your name, where you're based, how old you are, and how long you've been playing basketball.
No worries. Thanks, George, for having me along today. Looking forward to having a chat and bringing back some good memories. My name's Roger Coleman-Bock. I'm based in Blackburn here in Victoria. I've spent most of my time in Australia in Victoria with a little bit of time in Tassie. I'm from the States originally. And I've been playing, I worked it out last night, just under 50 years.
If we wind back the time machine, Roger, where did it all start for you? What's the first basketball memory that you have?
I come from a family of 7 kids, good Catholic family, and sports was important in the household. My mum started us all off as swimming first when we were quite young. Being from California, you want to learn to swim early because you spend a bit of time at the beach. And then the natural progression for all the kids was basketball. And all my siblings took basketball to a certain level. I probably took it the farthest. And my earliest memory was I was probably 9 or 10 years old, and my eldest brother, Phil, was playing for Ventura Community College, which is near my hometown of Oxnard. And there would have been 200-300 people in the stadium. And my mum had taken me along to see the game. And there's my brother out there shooting baskets, and these people are cheering. And I'm thinking, wow, this looks really interesting. I might like to take this on. And that's how it all started, I guess. I'm probably 9 years old.
Was there a hoop in the backyard or a school nearby where you'd go and practice your shooting? How did you get those early skills?
California's, all the schools are typically have outdoor basketball rings, and Oxnard's no different. I probably had, within 10-15 minutes walk, I probably had a choice of 3 different outdoor courts, and you'd grab a basketball and go down and shoot, take your friends down and go down and shoot. And did that a fair bit, and that probably got me started off.
You were on a school team, or did you join a suburban team?
Basketball in the States is pretty much linked to schools. The club concept was totally new to me when I eventually ended up in Australia, so it took me a few years to wrap my head around it, to be honest. So when I started primary school, I joined the basketball team, probably aged 10 or 11, and we trained 1 or 2 days a week on outside courts with the chain nets and wooden plywood backboards on the bitumen court. Ran up and down a bit, pretended we knew what we were doing. And then on the weekends, the local high school had a competition where the local schools would bring their teams in and play. And that was like the ultimate. We got to train during the week and pretend we were really good at basketball and play at the local high school. And the local high school was good at fostering that talent, so that they were trying to encourage the best players to eventually end up in that high school, which was Santa Clara High School, where I did end up eventually.
College ball followed high school basketball for you?
That's right. I think my whole career, I can summarize it as being in the right place at the right time. So Oxnard's fairly small, and the high school I went to was pretty small too. In terms of state high schools, we had less than 300 students. So we didn't play in the top conferences. But when I went to Santa Clara High School, I played for a legend of a coach who was one of the winningest coaches in California basketball history, a guy named Lucianovic. And just before I joined, he managed to convince the CIF, who runs state basketball in California, to take Santa Clara High School down a division, because they'd had so much success in, I think, the 60s and 70s that they were bumped up to a division where they just couldn't compete. They were competing against schools with up to 5,000 students, and here's this really small school. When I joined, when I started high school, they had been moved down to Division I or Section 1, which was a lower level, and I think it was sub 500 students, and we became really competitive. I didn't play senior basketball until my second year high school, so sophomore year. And right place, right time. We won the conference all 3 years that I played senior level, won the state championship my sophomore and junior years. So here I am, this young kid, didn't know what was going on. And we won the state CIF Division 1A, I think it's called, state championships, playing in Long Beach Stadium against a much bigger school. And I really have, my high school coach manufactured all that, and really, he's the real reason I'm still playing basketball today, to be honest.
Yeah, great. So, did you play college ball in California, or at what stage do you get to Texas?
Okay, good question. So, as a result of that success, and I made what's called recruiting lists. So my senior year, I started getting invitations to go to postseason tournaments. And those tournaments in the States are all about colleges and recruiters watching players and trying to pick and choose the players. And suddenly, my senior year, I had upwards of 100 offers for scholarships. And I had no idea how this happened, except that I'd made the list. And these summer league tournaments and invitationals were how I was getting the exposure. And you only, if you made the list, you got invited. And one of them, for example, had Bill Walton at the event, and he went through the postmen and did the post moves, and there was always a few guys in the crowds with clipboards, and those were apparently the recruiters, and they'd be looking for prospects. And long story short, I got offers from Rice University in Texas, Texas A&M, Washington State, were the main NCAA Division I offers. I think I visited those 3. At the time, I think you could visit 5 schools under the NCAA rules. And to put this in perspective, I loved basketball, but I was never a basketball nut, so I had no idea what the NCAA Division I was. I had no idea about these colleges. I picked Texas A&M because they showed the most interest in me, but I also had, my folks are from Texas, and I had relatives there. And I thought, when I went for the school visit, they took me to a Texas barbecue, and I thought, yeah, this is really good. I'll go to Texas A&M. So I ended up being the first player out of Santa Clara High School to sign for a Division I full scholarship. But I had no idea what that meant.
So Roger, Texas A&M Aggies is a US college that competed in SEC, in Big 12 and in SWC. Yeah. It played in NCAA tournaments for 16 years, made finals in 5 of those. You've told us how you landed at A&M, but what was it like being part of that college culture and part of that NCAA group?
Just extraordinary. Here's the small kid that I hadn't had taken a plane flight until they flew me to Texas for my initial visit. And suddenly I'm at Texas A&M University, a college at the time. I think they had 30 or 40,000 students, second largest military college in the US, and playing for an NCAA Division I school, playing for a living legend, a guy named Shelby Metcalf. He coached 27 seasons in the Southwest Conference, and is still to this day, I think, the winningest coach in that conference. And suddenly I'm on campus, living the life of living in a all athletics dormitory. Across Texas A&M, when I was there, was very much a gridiron school. Across the street is a stadium. The on-campus gridiron stadium holds 80,000 people. This is the on-campus stadium. I can see it from my dorm room. And when the gridiron team was playing, you can imagine what 80,000 people sound like outside your window. So I thought, oh, this could be all right. So my whole career is about being in the right place and just being lucky, and got to play with some great people.
Well, who did you, at that Texas time in your career, who did you play with or against that impressed you?
The Southwest Conference included a couple big names, SMU, Southern Methodist University, University of Houston, University of Arkansas. One of my earliest memories at Texas A&M was playing the University of Houston. At Houston, they let us know in advance that this game would be televised live on ESPN. And, you know, at the time, ESPN wasn't was the single source of sports in the States. And my family found out and couldn't believe that I was going to be on it. But there's a couple guys playing for the University of Houston you may have heard of. That was Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler.
Oh, goodness me.
They went on to be NBL Hall of Famers, both of them. And I remember distinctly, again, I'm not a basketball nut, so I didn't really know a lot about these guys. And I was just a young kid out of Oxnard. And Shelby said, let's just try and stay in touch with them. And I thought, that's a very odd thing to say as a coach as you started out on the court. I wasn't a starter at that stage, so I was just supporting as my first year. And Texas A&M ran an interesting offense, a double low. So with the point guard bringing it up and either going left or right, and Clyde would run off the double low. And there wasn't a lot of what do you call it, set plays beyond that. Once you set a screen and then you had to contend with Clyde Drexler and Hakeem Olajuwon. I think they beat us by 30 or 40 points back then, but I got to man up against Hakeem Olajuwon as a 18-year-old. He wasn't as well known back then, but obviously went on to a massive career.
If you think about the Texas period of your career, is there a highlight that you like to recall?
Probably playing against those two. Look, I didn't know it at the time, but playing against those two famous future NBA Hall of Famers. But also just the whole NCAA experience. In the States, the NCAA, a lot of people know it from March Madness, so the postseason tournaments, which while I was there, we didn't make. But also very big there in NCAA is the preseason tournaments. So, for example, with Texas A&M, I flew to play in the Great Alaskan Shootout. So I got to fly to Alaska, meet some incredible people, play against some incredible teams. And in every year, there was almost a competition to get the big schools like Texas A&M and others to these tournaments around the country. So they actually competed to get the big teams in because it would make a name for the tournament and the people. But it was always, we went to Florida one year, we went to Washington, D.C. one year. It was just magnificent. I got to see the United States. And of course we traveled, all expenses were paid by the university. So airfares, accommodation, food, everything. So just as this young kid bouncing around the US and learning how to play against the big boys, it was a really exciting time for me.
Roger, how do you go from Texas A&M to Gonzaga Bulldogs at Washington?
Excellent question. I spent 2 seasons at Texas A&M and realized that they had recruited another 6'9" center at exactly the same time as me, a guy named Jimmy Gilbert. And they didn't expect to get him. So he had much more interest than I did, and he was a Texas local. So they assumed he was going to look to go around the country, which is very typical of players, myself included. I chose Texas because it was a long way from California. But he ended up signing with Texas A&M, and lovely guy, got along with him really well, but it soon became apparent that they were going to put their time and effort into developing him, and I was always going to be behind him as a player. So being young and a bit full of myself, and I decided, I think I'll try to find another school. And even more silly, I let a full ride scholarship go without any place to go. During that summer, I just started ringing around. And I can't remember exactly how, but I rang Gonzaga, and they looked up my stats and said, okay, yeah, we're kind of looking for a new center. What say you come and just play the preseason, and we'll see if we can get you a full ride scholarship. NCAA, if you transfer, you have to redshirt a year. So I went up, and I don't think they could help me out. I think I actually had to pay for that year. But I did really well in the preseason, and they found a scholarship for me in the final 2 years of college. So I was very lucky that way.
So arguably, Gonzaga was a more successful team than Texas A&M. 26 NCAA championships and 2 Final Four placements. Competed in WCC, WCAC, Big Sky tournaments. Tell us about what was unique about the Washington experience for you.
Well, it was an interesting one. I turned up, as I mentioned, for my redshirt year, and I turned up a little bit early to meet the team and play a bit of summer season and work. And there's this point guard that was leading a lot of the summer sessions, a guy named John Stockton that you might have heard of. Eventually, of course, he NBA Hall of Famer himself. But an incredibly nice guy, and a local from Spokane, Washington. And again, me doing no research whatsoever, I had no idea who he was or what Gonzaga, what their reputation was as an organization and as a school. But I thought, Spokane, Washington, sounds good. I'll give it a go. But yeah, he turned out to be, well, as you know from his career, one of the most incredible point guards ever to play the game. And he was the nicest guy off the court. Once he stepped over that line, one of the fiercest competitors you will ever meet. But once you were back off the court, great guy to know and help me get involved in the school. Before, at that stage, he was holding out for his first contract in the NBA. He'd finished his career at Gonzaga, and he was holding out for the Utah Jazz to up the ante a little bit, I think. After his first year, they upped the ante considerably because he proved himself as a player.
How well did the two of you work together? Obviously, John Stockton, point guard, you playing centre. Do you have any sort of memorable moments that you like to sort of think back on?
My most vivid memory was running a fast break with John bringing the ball up. He loved his assists, and as you know, in the NBA, he worked a lot with Karl Malone, and they became one of the best pairs in the NBA. But he was like that with all his big guys. So we would be playing in summer, and he'd fire the ball at you, but if you miffed that pass for any reason, the next pass was coming harder and straight for your head. So that was his way of letting you know that don't miff one of my assists. But what I took from that, and a lot of the guys took from that, was the absolute inspiration. He was going to get you the ball at that right point when you could score. So you had to keep your eye on him. And the one thing you learned with John was whenever you were on the court, you never didn't know where he was, because you needed to see what he was doing, even if he was just guiding the team without the ball. But if he had the ball in his hands, you were either screening for him or posting for him, expecting a pass. And that was a little bit of a change coming from Texas A&M. We had a lot more individual style players. But yeah, it was a breath of fresh air to get a guard that wanted to make us look better, as well as himself.
Who else, what other personalities were part of that Washington time? Someone you played with, someone you played against?
Quite a few guys. Not a lot of the names come to mind, but as an experience, it was excellent. Much smaller school than Texas A&M. a few thousand students as opposed to 30, 40,000 students. So the campus environment, and you'll see this a lot in the Gonzaga Bulldog Club now that you see in the March Madness and stuff like that, absolute fanatics. And both the players and the coaches and the fans lived and breathed basketball. And walking around campus, they all knew who you were and asked how you were going. But unlike a lot of the other colleges, there was also an emphasis on getting a degree. So I played with guys that went on to get their PhDs and masters and things like that. There was always this emphasis on education, and I got my business degree from Gonzaga, which I'm quite proud of, while still playing NCAA basketball. So it was a good time.
What followed Washington?
I finished my career and I thought that was it. Went back to Oxnard, applied for a good government role, worked on one of the local military bases, and I had started off my career. I thought that was it. One of the guys I graduated with, a guy named Mike Champion, had got the call up to play for the Canberra Cannons here in Australia. I think he played the second half of the season, and then the next season he got picked up by Bayside Blues in Frankston and broke his leg. And Bayside didn't have a lot of recruiting money. They said, "Hey, do you know anyone that can play basketball?" And they said, "Yeah." Mike said, "Yeah, I know this guy, Roger." I was Roger Bock at the time before I got married. So on a whim, I quit my job, all within probably a month between the starting phone call and landing at Tullamarine. I was here playing for the Bayside Blues in Frankston. Funny story, I get off the plane, I do remember it was around Australian Open time, so it was really hot. Go out the doors at Tullamarine, it's 40 degrees. I'd never experienced sticky flies. These flies are flying around me, on my face, flying in my mouth. I'm thinking, what have I got myself into? I knew very little about Australia. Crocodile Dundee was about my best education. And then Peter Fleming, the coach from Bayside Blues in Frankston, rocks up. At that stage, you could pull right up to the terminal. He jumps out of the car and he looks me up and down. Peter's a shortish guy, and he says, "You're really 6'9". And I thought, what an odd thing to say. I'm 6'9". I said I was all my playing career, all the statistics. He said, no, you've got to realize that a lot of the American imports that fly across on the plane shrink 5 or 6 inches before they get here. So your 6'8" forward gets on the plane and he turns out to be 6'2" when he arrives. And I said, oh, well, that's interesting enough.
How long did you play at Bayside Blues?
Played a couple seasons there. Great bunch of guys. One of the guys that plays with under 50s, over 50s at Nunawading, Paul Dow, was actually in that program as well. And I've known Paul obviously for many, many years now. But really, really good initiation. I'd come from this highly organized, well-funded groups at Texas A&M and Gonzaga to what appeared like just casual basketball in Siebel at the time. All the guys had jobs, and as it turned out, I needed to find a job too. The pinnacle of my Siebel career was making $200 a game, and we had 2 games a week, and they provided me a great old Cortina to drive. I thought that was a fun car to drive, and I looked at it as a holiday. You know, I had a sports visa for, I think it's 7 months at the time, and paid holiday. They played for the trip out. So I was enjoying it immensely. Great bunch of guys. It came to the end of the season, and the coach said, "Oh, do you want to fly home?" I said, "Well, yes and no. Can I play for another season?" "Oh, yeah, sure, you can play for another. Do you mind if I stay here instead of flying home?" And that saved the team a little bit of money. They said yes, because I'd already started a job at that stage, working in IT. I started my career, and I thought, oh yeah, this seems good. 30 plus years later, I travel home now and again, but I'm definitely founded in Australia now.
Am I right in saying the next phase of your career was Nunawading Spectres?
That's right. So after 2 seasons there, I don't remember exactly how I ended up signing up with Colin Donovan was the coach at Nunawading Spectres. And that was a bit closer to home, which at the time I think I was living in Doncaster. And I'd started a family, so it worked out a little bit better in terms of traveling distance and still working full time. So I played a couple seasons there. It was an interesting one because that was the era of having the NBL side and the Siebel side. Yeah. So I played for the Siebel side, but the NBL was always the pinnacle that the players were trying to do really well in Siebel to try to be considered for the NBL. And people like Dean Utoff were in the NBL side, living legend. I remember coming to clinics and the kids would just surround Dean and he'd be sitting on the bench, and he's bigger than me, 6'9", and such a big guy, but he was so good with the kids, had so much time for them.
Do you have a highlight from your Nunawading Spectres time?
I do. I think it was the second season. We were halfway through the season. We're warming up at the Nunawading Stadium, and in those days, the breakaway rings were actually bolted directly to the plexiglass, not like they are now with the hydro ribs that take the pressure away from the plexiglass. So I go up at halftime, just do a casual two-handed dunk, and I come down with the ring in my hand. And the whole stadium kind of stops, and the referees stop. Of course, they didn't have a spare backboard or anything like that. And they had a quick meeting and obviously had to call the game off. But went home early, and the coach couldn't help but be upset, but actually impressed at the same time. Long story short, we didn't make the playoffs, but to meet our requirements of the Siebel, we had to come back after the end of the season to play the second half of that game against the other team, I can't remember who it was, who hadn't made the playoffs either. So there wasn't a lot of interest in playing half a game of basketball. But ran into one of the referees many years later who had reffed that game, and he said, I remember you. I was just playing social ball at Nunawading. You broke the backboard at Nunawading. So, interesting story.
At some stage, your time at Nunawading ends, and did you keep playing basketball, or did your basketball journey sort of take a little pause there before Masters basketball?
By that stage, I had 4 kids, and we decided shortly after that to move back to Tassie for a bit more family support. My wife's from Tassie. And I played on and off. I played a little bit in Tassie, but nothing serious. And then there was a period there for a number of years I didn't play at all. Just concentrated on raising the kids and my career. But I always knew that I missed it. So fast forward a few years, my kids are playing domestic, and I'm coaching. At one stage, I was coaching 4 domestic teams across my 4 kids. And I met, Rod Mason, whose son was also playing basketball, and he said, we play. His team was actually on a Thursday night up at Nunawading, and the premise was it was a father-son thing. So a lot of the guys had their sons on the team. What happened a few years in is the sons went off and did their own things. And what that left us with was old guys playing highest level domestic. And whilst we still had the skills in the half court, we were getting smashed in the running side of things. So went through a number of seasons of that. And that, I remember Rod saying, Nunawading's looking at organising a over 50s team, and I thought, that sounds great. Just the fact that you would be playing with people who was your age group instead of the younger generation. Oh, go back a little bit further. Rod also had a masters team, and whilst I was playing Thursday nights, I hadn't played in his team, and he said, "Oh, listen, do you want to come to Adelaide? We're playing in the masters there." And I had no knowledge whatsoever of what masters basketball was. My understanding of masters coming from the States was green jackets and golf. So went off to Adelaide, thought, oh, this is fantastic. Everyone's in their own age groups. There's some former NBL legends in the younger age groups, Anstey and others. And just this camaraderie that you experience at the masters level, where it's a good, strong competition, but they're on the same level as you because they're in the same age group, but they're also concerned to not injure each other. So everyone's quite responsive to everybody's well-being, and that includes teams for other teams. And I experienced that up at Nunawading as well. And that turned it from being just a little bit enjoyable to very enjoyable for me. As a younger player, I played the big strong man, pounding inside. The farthest I got away from the basket was the free throw line for the flex offense, and on occasion shooting the ball, but most of the time I was getting inside doing the rebounding and the pounding and stuff like that. Whereas in Masters, I think I actively avoid that sort of contact now, which is a shift in my game.
Roger, your story is one of those classic Masters basketball stories in that we don't know that this world exists called Masters basketball until by accident we stumble across it or someone tells us about it, and then we play our first tournament and we can't get enough and we roll up for every tournament after that. Yep. I'm also keen to talk about Nunawading. You mentioned Nunawading's on Thursday night with Rod. A person by the name of Graham LaFontaine, and also John Urquhart were some of the people that first got together with Nunawading and started talking about what has become Victoria's genuine over 50s weekly competition, the only one that we know of. That thing exists in Adelaide for over 50s crowd and over 60s crowd, but in Victoria the only stadium that's actually replicated at is Nunawading. So tell us about the Nunawading comp. What's it like? What's the competition like? You and I face off against each other regularly over there. Tell us about that experience.
Well, I think, is it the third season we're in too? I could have that wrong, but most enjoyable. So you get people with all skills, all talents, but everyone's welcome. And given the age group, we're also similar skills. So the fast breaks might not be as prevalent as they used to be in the younger league. But my personal experience has been just feeling like this is what it's meant to be. A bunch of guys that love the game, a bunch of guys that want to have a bit of fun, compete hard when they're out there, but also have a chat and see how you're going afterwards. And I must admit, when we were before the over 50s, when we were getting smashed by these younger teams in the Division 1 or the highest social leagues, I was starting to lose interest a little bit, particularly since my son, who had played with it a season or two or a few times, had gone on to other things. I was starting to lose interest. Now I'm well and truly committed to it and back into it.
You're about to head off for a tournament called the Squizzy Classic, named after Michael Squizzy Taylor, a very important figure in Victorian basketball. That's down at Kurumburra, and you're going to play with your old mate Paul Dowell as part of the Pacemakers, which is one of those great names for a Masters basketball club, a bit like Voltaren that I played against not long ago. You're looking forward to playing with Paul and the guys coming up this weekend? Absolutely.
They've always been, on the Thursday nights, they've been a fierce competitor, and it's quite good to play against Paul, because I played with him down at Frankston many years ago, and always thought he was a good, strong player, but he's obviously got a bunch of guys that are very talented, and he's the facilitator in that team as well. So not only a good shooter, but a facilitator. And I really like the team play, particularly at this age group. I like making sure that everyone is part of a contributing part of the team, because I think it just adds to the whole experience. If guys are going to come along, they want to touch the ball, they want to have a shot, and I don't really care win or loss. I want to make sure they're coming back next week because they had an enjoyable time. And I think this team is just the epitome of that sort of basketball.
Well, both you and Paul are giants. Have you worked out who's playing centre on the weekend yet?
I've told him I'm going to be point guard bringing the ball up, so that means it probably won't make it past half court, to be honest. But no, we haven't even trained together, so I'm sure we'll work it out on the day.
Sure you will. How's your health, Roger?
Really good. I've been quite lucky in that department as well. Normally big guys like myself either have knees or ankle problems. Interestingly enough, I played most of my career in the States with my ankles taped and rolled my ankles out often. Coming to Australia, I don't know if it's a different style or just getting a bit older, I haven't had ankle issues. It's been just more joint issues that come with getting older. I've had both my shoulders cleaned up through keyhole surgery at some stage, but besides that, been very, very lucky.
What makes a good centre in your view? I note that you've still got quite a lethal sort of two-point shot as well as being very competent under the basket. What do you think the sort of key attributes of a good centre are when it comes to sort of playing ball?
It's an interesting one, certainly in this age group. I think it's vision. The centre in these competitions tends to draw a lot of attention and therefore draw a lot of players. It's not unusual for me to be guarded by 2 to 3 defenders. So you have to make a quick decision whether the best idea is to try to beat them or dish the ball off. I like to dish a fair bit, and it's funny, the Pan Pacifics a couple of years back, there's a photo, one of the official photos of me with the ball, and in the photo it's just me looking to someone to pass to and the 5 defenders surrounding me, and I've got that photo somewhere. So the entire opposition team is guarding me, and I don't remember it at the time other than I was looking for someone to dish, but I don't remember. And that's very true on a Thursday night, I think, is you tend to draw a lot of attention. So you want to make sure that you're getting it to the open man and making sure they're in a position to be able to score. So I'm telling my teammates a lot, listen, I'm drawing 3-4 guys. When I do, you need to make your way to the basket because I'll get you the ball.
It'd be great to understand a little bit more about what you do when you're not playing basketball.
Okay. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I started off in IT just by accident when I first came across to play Siebel, and I've been there ever since. So IT sales, and I've worked for some small and larger companies. I spent 19 years at Telstra most recently, and now I'm currently with Telstra competitor TPG Telecom. But just in line with my degree, business management degree, I somehow ended up in IT sales and never looked back.
How's your family?
Going very well. I'm trying to keep that, I've kept that tradition of basketball going, and they've all played. I've got 2 boys, 2 girls. They're adults now, but when they were younger, I coached them and they all played domestic Vermont Vultures up at Nunawading. My eldest boy, Jacob, went on to play Keilor Thunder, and I think they won 2 championships in his time there, which he's quite proud of. He's moved on now. Zachary, my younger boy, he's played for Nunawading in NBL 1 for a couple seasons. Now he's at RMIT in the Big V and doing very well. He loves it there.
And how long do you plan to keep working and keep playing?
Well, I'd love to retire from working and concentrate on my basketball career. Now that I understand this magnificent world of masters, probably have 3 or 4 more years working, but I can't see ending basketball anytime soon. it's so inspiring when you go to the Masters events and see the over 70s out there playing basketball and playing good basketball. They might not be moving as quick up and down, and some of them are they're playing the half court, but just that inspiration to stay fit, excuse me, and keep turning up and playing, and you always get that feeling of camaraderie. It's funny, even in the Masters competitions, I now run into former American basketballers who have had kids come through the system similar to me, and now they've gone back and started playing Masters. The first experience, going back to my experience in Adelaide, we turned up for the initial sign-up process when we turned in Adelaide, and it's in the Art Centre or the Performing Centre there, and they've got these booths and stuff set up where you register. And I saw one for the Japan Masters, and this is pre-COVID. And Rod turns to me and said, "Oh yeah, we've got a team going to Japan, and are you interested?" I said, "Hey, yeah, absolutely." Unfortunately, COVID hit, and that one was cancelled. But it's that concept that this is a worldwide thing. Fast forward a couple of years, I'm playing Pan Pacifics in Gold Coast, and I run into a Canadian team, and they've been playing together since primary school, and they're now playing Masters League, and they bring their families along, and they've been playing in Australia for years. And you have a beer with them afterwards and listen to their stories. They're ex-college players, they've got their young family, they've got grandkids along, and I think, oh, this is really what it's meant to be. You know?
Yeah, there's lots of Masters basketballers that have transitioned to retirement or at least a slower life, and now this roaming around globally is something that they're doing. So on the back of following COVID, we had teams going to South Korea recently, the Auckland Masters Games, lots of players that went across to FIBA World Maxi Ball Championships in Argentina, some players including myself heading across to the FIBA European Championships in Italy, and otherwise I've heard whispers of people going to Cleveland very shortly as well. So there's this opportunity to not only keep playing Masters basketball, but to go and do that internationally. Roger, thanks so much for your time. It's been a pleasure to meet you around the Nunawading Stadium in this over 50s competition. I look forward to playing with you at the Squizzy, or playing against you at the Squizzy Classic, and also in upcoming tournaments. Thanks so much for sharing your story with us.
Thanks for having me, George.
Play hard.
Cheers.